All right, what's up, everybody? Stuart Anderson here, episode 81, Mi Duole podcast. Super grateful for Jason Lang. He set up our podcast here with Burke Swindlehurst. If you don't know Burke, local pro and obviously creator of the Crusher in the Tushar. We spent a great hour interview with him talking about his career as a pro cyclist and also when he retired, what he did to create Crusher in the Tushar and how the transition is going, giving it to Lifetime. So super cool to hear from him, the founder and father of Crusher in the Tushar. He has some incredible advice and insight into everything about that race, as well as really fun to hear about his life as a pro. So hopefully you enjoy this podcast. We recorded it, a week ago. We were high on camp. So grateful for all that came to camp, that came to St. George, those that planned camp and participated, and especially our awesome raffle. So many fun prizes from Ventum, giving away the frame, from our awesome friends at TBD who brought a tarmac frame that they also gave away through a fun raffle where we raised some money for Wheels of Justice. So grateful for camp, all the time that was spent and money to be together and enjoy some warmer weather down in St. George. So big thanks to everybody there. Big shout out to Matt Ryder and his family. Absolutely just love that guy and love his family as he's celebrating his father, Creighton Ryder, who passed away just last week. A lot of great memories from Matt that are being shared and what he learned from his father. And especially, if you didn't know it, everyone that wears a yellow jersey on Zwift made a $50 donation to ALS in Creighton Ryder's honor. So when you see those jerseys, I hope you remember how special he was and his example to the team as just an incredible man. We interviewed him back in podcast number 11 that if you haven't listened to it, you should. Really cool experience to hear from Creighton, who had ALS for almost 16 years. So big love to Matt and his family as they celebrate his father's life. So, all right, enjoy this episode with Burke. Love doing it, and hope you all enjoy. All right, bye. All right, hey everybody, welcome to Mi Duole podcast. Stuart Anderson here with Jason Lang. Hey, Jace.
Hey, how's it going?
Going very good. And Burke Swindlehurst. Hey, Burke.
Hey, fellas.
Grateful to have you with us. We are going to introduce Burke in just one sec. First, I wanted to thank everybody who joined us last week in Team Camp. So fun to be down in St. George with almost 90 people. Incredible group rides, fun dinners, raffles. Thanks to Jake Cook, Jim Hutton for hosting us at his house. He was so gracious. Dude, Jim Hutton had like 90 people in his house, feeding us Cafe Rio, and just perfect weather down in St. George. So thanks everybody for 2023 Team Camp. It was a lot of fun. We've opened up the summer kits, so they're back open until May 8th. So get your, I don't know, Jace, what are you going to order? Anything on the docket here for you?
Man, I love racing in that 2-in-1 suit.
Okay. All right.
That's the most comfortable way to go for me. I don't know what it is. It just fits me right.
Skin suit. And Jason declared this morning on our group chat that he has wasted thousands of dollars on the wrong sizes of all of our equipment. So just let him know if you have questions about sizes.
There's a learning curve.
Yeah, big time. That's fun. Very cool. Well, if you don't know Burke, you should. He started racing bikes in the late 1980s, built a successful career as a rider, who emerged from Utah, which is always fun. We're always I get jacked up whenever we anybody that has a connection to Utah who's a professional rider. I'm like, yes, let's go, Utah guy.
That's right.
But you probably know him from after his retirement. He started to create the Crusher in the Tushar, which we absolutely love. Last year, over 20 guys from the team participated in the Crusher race. So obviously we'll talk about that today. But last year was Burke's last opportunity to be the race director of Crusher, presented by the Creamery, which I'd never eaten at before. Jace, did you? You were like, yeah, that was the first time I ever went.
You haven't lived.
I know. we stood in line for 45 minutes to get I don't even know what, mac and cheese or something, but it was very good. I watched a video today where Burke said that mile for mile, there is no tougher race on the planet than the Crusher. And I love that. I want to talk about that today. Maybe a little more about why he feels that. But it's a huge part of our culture. We wanted to first express our gratitude for Crusher, what it is, what you created, how our team rallies behind it. It is just one of the coolest things to talk about, to participate in. And I wish I could share my screen with some of the pictures from last year's carnage at the top. We had a teammate that laid on the concrete for what, an hour, just like laying there.
And then he moved into the tent and got some oxygen.
So funny, dude. But super grateful to have you on, Burke. Welcome. And Burke has a connection to the team. He knows us from way back when, but we're grateful to have you on. So welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on the podcast.
Very cool. I looked up, Jace would probably know more about some of your old professional race stats. Jace, did you want to dive into any of those before we get into the, I mean, I know you know what you probably have it open on your screen right now as to old stats.
I mean, I love looking at your old stuff, Burke, just because it takes us back to a time when there was tons of races in the US, and there was domestic teams, and you could make a living as a professional cyclist here in the US and not have to go over to Europe. And I think that was the coolest part of when you started racing bikes in the heyday.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today, and I think about it often. Just how fortunate I was to bike race during the 1990s in general, especially here in the US. Like there were so many amazing races. You could probably, I mean, I could rattle off, I don't know, probably at least a dozen, maybe 2 dozen, just like incredible stage races that we used to have all across the country. And I mean, you could easily have, you know, a 90-day race year in the United States alone of like high quality races with, you know, deep fields and lots of spectators and just in really cool places. And, you know, at the time, I mean, that's just what it was, right? You didn't really realize how cool it was, but in retrospect, looking back and also just kind of seeing what the landscape of road cycling looks like now here in the US, it was a really, I guess, a magic time, really, to be able to do something like that.
Yeah. Burke, from when you look back on how you got into it, maybe share with everybody real quick your history, how you chose bikes, how you chose endurance sports.
Yeah. So I'd always just kind of loved bikes, and I think maybe that's just at least the, you know, the generation that I grew up in. I think everybody loved bikes, right? Because that was your first taste of freedom. You know, whatever age you were, like you get your first bike and suddenly like you're a free person. You can go and, you know, cruise around the neighborhood. It'll take you places. So for me, bikes were always foremost in my life. As just, I just can't picture my life without a bike. In fact, I remember my grandma telling me that she used to have this old parking strip with like it's kind of like concrete with a grass strip in between. And she said, I used to get on my tricycle and ride around that grass strip for hours. Just like maybe that's why I hated criteriums as I got older, but got it out of my system at a young age. But yeah, so I mean, bikes were always there for me. And then as far as the endurance side of things go, it actually dates back to when I was in Scouts, of all things. We had the hiking merit badge, and to get the hiking merit badge, you had to cover 50 miles in one go. And there was actually like a thing, I don't know how long it happened for, but they called it the 50-20. Where the Scouts would, you know, you'd all drive up to like, this is the place monument at like 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. And then you'd basically just walk to Provo.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We're way too soft for that now.
Tons of Scouts. And so that was my first taste of like an endurance thing. And so I remember driving up there, and they dropped us off, and it was crazy too, because there was like zero supervision. Like we were just freelancing on our own. And I remember just like I would kind of alternate between running and walking, but it was just one of the coolest experiences I'd ever had up to that point, because I'm just like running at like 2 a.m. through, you know, American Fork by myself. and, you know, get to like the city park in Provo at like 9 a.m. and got my hiking merit badge, and
Yes.
realized that I absolutely loved just doing something that consuming and that strenuous for that long. So that was kind of my first taste of endurance sports. And then I actually did the St. George Marathon a couple times. I think when I was like 11 and 12. And then I had an uncle who I basically idolized. Like, he was a pilot in the Air Force, and he bike raced, and he lived in Alaska. And we had the U.S. National Championships were hosted in Park City. I want to say that was in 1986. And he came out and stayed with us for that. We lived in Provo, and I went and watched him bike race. And as soon as I saw it, like, I watched him do a crit in downtown Park City, and I just like walked away, and I told my mom, like, I want a road bike. That's what I want to do. That's all I could think about from then on.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So we touched on maybe just a little bit earlier, but you kind of raced in the heyday too. So you got your start in the late 80s, you raced through the 90s, early 2000s when cycling was peaking. There was tons of races. You were able to make a living as a cyclist. I mean, you won Tour of the Gila multiple times. You know, finished the Tour of Utah. That was your last race, right? Crossing the finish line in Tour of Utah at Snowbird. We got all these great races. What in the world happened? We don't have Tour of California. We don't have Utah. Tour of the Gila canceled their 1-2 race this year. Like, why is America falling out of love?
I think that's a really complicated question. And again, it's another thing I think about a lot. I mean, I think there are multiple reasons for road racing kind of dying off in the US. Not the least of which I personally believe kind of like there was that time period when suddenly there was like, you know, there was the Tour of California, there was the Tour of Missouri, there's the Tour to Georgia, the Tour of Utah. Suddenly, if you weren't a UCI race, a lot of teams would kind of look down their nose at like a race like Cascade or, you know, the Killington stage race. I mean, there were just numerous stage races all over the US, really great stage races. And suddenly there was this thing where like, if you didn't get into one of those major UCI races, you weren't necessarily a legit team. And so suddenly teams started just pouring resources into trying to get into those races and stopped going to these other races that had been around for so long. And I think participation started to go down. And I think a lot of that was largely due in part to that shift in focus towards having a UCI event I don't know if it was to, you know, maybe look more legitimate. I mean, I think there are a lot of factors behind that, but I do think that was one factor in that. A lot of these races that had been around for so long, the Tour of Willamette would be another example, the Vuelta de Bisbee, you know, a lot of really great stage races just kind of fell by the wayside because of that, in my opinion. I also think it's really hard to put on a bike race, and especially now where, you know, there aren't as many rural roads that, you know, I mean, shutting down roads for a bike race that's a major thing. And nowadays that costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of planning. I just think there are numerous hurdles in the way for, you know, stage racing in particular in the US and good road races. So I could probably go on all day about that.
It is crazy to watch. And I think it plays into, you know, when we're going to talk about how our team specifically has moved a lot towards gravel racing and kind of the attitude of our guys. But maybe looking back, Burke, when you think about your career and the things that you've participated in, is there any favorite memories you have from what you participated in and maybe why those are your favorites? Is there anything that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, like my favorite times were before I turned professional, actually, kind of like the process of trying to break into the sport and you know, get a professional contract. So like 1990, 92 through 97. Those were great years. I was racing for the Brackman brothers and Einstein's teams back then. And we were just kind of this ragtag group of guys that, really wanted to break through. And we had a great time, camping and sleeping on floors and just doing all those fun things that, looking back on now, it's just like some of the stuff, some of the drives we pulled off between races and the places we slept. I mean, I've slept on a picnic table at 10,000 feet in New Mexico before on the way to get to Tour of the Gila. I mean, those are the things that you remember for a long time, for me personally anyway, more so than even some of the larger marquee professional races that I did.
I love that. Very cool. Jace, you can't complain about a bad night's sleep before loaded,
I never sleep well the night before a race. You guys sleep well before the race?
I mean, if you sleep on a park bench, yeah, I mean, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even have an excuse. I'm not a professional. I'm usually in a hotel room in a nice bed. And I still get nervous for some reason. Hopefully everybody's the same.
I'm the
same. That's a good sign. Getting nervous.
This means I'm excited.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I guess let's transition into gravel then, since that's what kind of our loves have turned towards, especially yours, Burke. And can you talk about maybe what spurred the move from road to gravel? And maybe, I mean, I guess you retired and shortly after you kind of created Tushar.
Yeah, I mean, that was a matter of, I don't know, less than 6 months that all kind of happened. But it had been percolating in my mind. The idea for what is the Crusher now had been percolating in my mind for at least 10 to 15 years, just based on rides that I'd done in the area. My family's from Beaver, and so I'd spend a lot of time there and riding my bike. And there's not a whole lot of roads there, and the roads that there are, I'd done more than enough time on those roads, and so it was time to kind of start investigating all the gravel roads that were around there. So that's kind of what led to that. But for me personally, I just think that the time was just kind of right in general. Living in Salt Lake, I'd kind of, I mean, you guys know what it's like you go out for a road ride, and basically especially if you're riding with other people, you spend most of the ride being hyper vigilant, like looking over your shoulder and being aware of traffic and all the dangers out there all the time. And for me, like getting out on a gravel road is just kind of like the ultimate freedom, where you can let your mind wander a bit. And if you have somebody with you, you guys can have a conversation without like constantly looking over your left shoulder and singling up and, all that kind of stuff. So it's just, I don't know, I guess it's just kind of a continuation of being that, that little kid who got on a bike, at the first time when you just get on the bike and you start to feel freedom again.
Nice.
I actually love that you mentioned that. As you were talking, I was thinking about how you really have to concentrate so much more on the road. You're pointing out obstacles and potholes and gravel and sand and whatever else, traffic. And it's crazy when you're out on those roads, you kind of just talk to the people that you're riding with. There's always little things, but yeah, there's not all that. It's not the same concentration level, I guess. Way more freedom.
Like a herd of cows on the backside of the Col de Crush.
Yeah.
Just standing in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
So
fun.
I guess you're on your road bike, right? You said you started looking for other routes. You're still a professional, but like looking for different roads to train on. So you take your tiny 23 millimeter road tires and you're riding on these gravel roads, or what?
Well, actually, I sized up. I went for the big dogs, 25Cs. 25C Continental Super Sport.
Nice.
That was my go-to tire. That was the closest thing to like a gravel tire back then.
No way.
Oh yeah. And of course, back then, I was still probably running 100 PSI because I didn't want to pinch flat, right? Which means that I was just skating. Anytime I'd hit a downhill, it was just like grim death, holding onto the bars.
So that's wild. So So I guess I can't even understand how you found yourself in the back roads of Beaver on that type of a bike to create something like Crusher. Can you tell us how that happened?
Yeah, I mean, well, at the time, I mean, that was basically all I had. You know, occasionally I'd hop on a mountain bike and I'd do a lot of the same rides, but I I lo- I I didn't really necessarily like doing out and back rides. I always like to do a loop if possible. And so, and being able to connect like pavement and gravel together, that was by far my favorite thing, was to be able to do a ride where you could kind of string together the two things and connect the dots. And so, um, you know, since I was road racing full time, that was my job. I mean, it also made sense that I would be spending time on that bike, especially, back in the day, like you didn't really, it was frowned upon to even like for road racers to even mountain bike. Like it was too dangerous. The position was different. There are all these like preconceived notions about bikes and like how, specificity was everything. And so even to kind of, dabble in mountain bike racing, which I did as well. I would get looked at askance by a lot of the team directors and fellow riders for that reason. But I just like being on a bike, regardless of the surface. And more so for me, gravel roads always took me to places that I found were cool and also out of the way, where I could, again, not constantly be doing that vigilant look over the shoulder or worrying about getting buzzed by a car or whatever it happened to be. So that's just kind of how I gravitated towards them.
Nice. Burke, in my normal job that makes money, we spend time training dentists
Mhm.
how to have a great culture in their practice. So how to train a team. When a patient walks in, we provide tools for a dentist to use to, how can my patient have a great experience?
Mhm.
The reason I bring that up is that I'm fascinated with the culture of Crusher.
Mm.
I feel like there is something special there, whether it's you tried to create it or whether it just happened on its own. Um, but can you talk about that? Uh, um, why you think Crusher is different? Why the culture there feels different? Why people are like, I'm not just going to race. They actually enjoy the entire experience of being there. Is that something that you created intentionally, or is that something that has happened just over time?
I would say is a little bit of both. I mean, one of the things about my vision for Crusher was I wanted to bring together the different cycling communities. So, as I mentioned, I mountain bike raced off and on throughout my career, and I got to really enjoy being around those people. They just had a different attitude, a lot more. I wouldn't say less serious, but they were just a little more lighthearted, and they didn't keep their cards as close to their chest
Mm.
as road racers. And there was just kind of like a more welcoming attitude among the mountain bike racers, and just kind of a friendship that, I don't know, there wasn't like this fear of the outsider. Like when you're on a road racing team, like it's you against the world, right? It's like you and your teammates, and then it's you against every other team, and you rarely would let your guard down enough to like um, really become friendly with other people on other teams, unless you'd actually kind of been on a team with them prior. But there was just kind of this inherent, what's the word I'm looking for? Just us versus them kind of thing that wasn't present in mountain biking. So for Crusher, like that was part of my vision, is like I wanted to bring together these other communities, like mountain bikers, cyclocross riders, riders that maybe hadn't even raced a bike before, road racers, and get everybody in the same place, doing the same thing, and just see what happens, and see if those barriers could be broken down a little bit, and people could let their guard down a little bit and do something that nobody was comfortable with, right? Like
Hmm.
especially early on with Crusher, like there weren't dedicated gravel bikes, so people were making Franken bikes. You had people that were like comfortable on part of the course and then scared out of their minds on the other half of the course, and vice versa. So, the comfort, everybody's comfort zone was being pushed, which I thought was really cool, and also helped to kind of create that community of like people, sharing with each other instead of guarding information. People were sharing information to see if they could learn something that they didn't know, which was another thing that was very much not part of road racing, is you didn't share information. Like, you always wanted to keep your edge.
Yeah.
So even among teammates and best friends, like if you had something that, like a training technique or maybe a supplement or whatever, you would never lift the lid on it because you didn't want to give up your edge.
I love that. Very cool. Nice.
On that note with Crusher, I'm just wondering, I read or listened to you in another podcast or read something online about a different route originally. And Crusher's hard enough. We had Alex Wild on a couple of weeks ago, and he said it was by far the hardest race in the Lifetime Series for him. A lot of other people feel the same way. The pros are just getting killed out there. Was it even harder before?
Yeah, so I call it the original course. And again, this is me coming like fresh off my pro career, and the course that I originally had planned was going to be 85 miles long, with 12,500 feet of climbing. Yeah. And as luck, I shouldn't say luck or fate, whatever you want to call it, maybe a little bit of both. We had a snow year, not unlike the one we've had this year, and I had to do a complete scramble reroute like 2 weeks before the race, when I realized there was still 5 feet of snow on the course that I wanted to go on, because it went up over 11,000 feet. The course that I had originally planned on was like 11,500 feet in one place.
Oh my goodness.
And there'd actually been a huge avalanche that had kind of like wiped out part of the road. So this was kind of my plan B, and as luck would have it, I mean, I think it turned out to be a better course, honestly. I think the other course would have been just over the top, which, you know, I think there's a trend in gravel in particular. Everybody's just trying to one up the next person and like put on the longest, hardest, whatever. And I think that's kind of a race to the bottom, honestly, because you can only have so many of those races, you know, where you can only do like 2 or 3 races like that in a year, and then you're totally fried mentally, physically, emotionally. And so honestly, I'd like to see more gravel events that are in the, 60 to 90 mile range, where you can finish and then actually enjoy yourself and hang out with people afterwards instead of go straight to bed.
So what's the key to that? I mean, Crusher is an extremely difficult course, but there's a way to enjoy yourself. What's the key? What's the key to having a great day at Crusher?
Oh, geez. I mean, I guess it depends on what you want to get out of the experience, right? I mean, like you said, there's so many different people showing up to a race like Crusher for different reasons. You know, some people want to test themselves, some people want to win the race, other people want to finish. For some people, it's all about the community that we've talked about. So I think that's kind of the really cool thing about gravel in general too, is that each person can go to an event and have different expectations. It's not all about the outcome. It's not about the start line, the finish line necessarily. A lot of it's about what happens in between and before and after, where, road racing is like you show up and like the first person across the line. I mean, that's what you're there for, right? You want to win. You want to be the first person across the line, hurry up and get awards over with, and then hop in your car and drive home, and I think gravel has kind of turned that on its head and turned it more into an experience and more of a community thing. So, I don't know if that necessarily answers your question.
That's the spirit of gravel. You just described the spirit of gravel.
I don't know if you guys had, Burke, you raced last year on the course. I know I saw you there.
Yeah.
There were 2 experiences last year that came to mind as Burke was describing what he was just describing. One, there was a man huddled under like a bush on the cold. He was like trying to hide in the shade on the coal. And I'm like, dude, there's no, just get back on. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I remember is, I think it was the DNA tent there's TJ Eisenhart. He's like sitting in a chair. And I actually didn't experience this. My wife did, but he was sitting there just like drinking a Coke, TJ. And he yells at her, "Come on in, sit down, have a Coke, bro." Like he was just like, I'm like, dude, he's one of the pros.
He's
like,
dealing vibes.
Dude, he's just anyway, there's so many things like that I think is so fun. And I guess to lead into my question, Burke, I'm nervous. Are you nervous transferring the race over to Lifetime? Are you nervous that stuff like that will be lost? Did you consider stuff like that? Was that ever a fear, or are you happy they have it? Are you grateful that Lifetime's got the race?
So to answer your question, yes, that was absolutely a fear, and it was something I thought a lot about. When I contemplated transitioning out of this, and it has been a long time coming, 3 or 4 years, of just kind of getting to where I'm like, I just don't know how much more of this I have in me, because I put so much into it, and it was so exhausting on every level for me that I knew that I needed to figure something out, and so there I basically had 2 options. It was like, I discussed this with some of my close friends. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make it to year 10, and then year 10 is going to be it. We're going to say, hey, hope everybody had fun. This has been great. Love you guys. Love everything that happened here, but we're out. That was one option. The other option was to try and find a home for Crusher, a good home where I know that it could be in good hands and live on beyond the energy that I had to put into it, because it was starting to drain from me. Just it's hard to explain, because everybody asks me, he's like, well, what was so hard about it? And it's like, oh, it's not just one thing. It's like death by 1,000 cuts, right? When you really put your heart and soul entirely into something, you eat, sleep, drink, and breathe and live it every day. For me, there's just like a finite amount of that. And I experienced that in my racing career too. I retired when I was 37, but I think my body probably had another 6-7 years left in it, but my spirit, my mind were done. And that's kind of where I got to with Crusher too. So I'd kind of resigned myself to having it come and be that 10-year thing, where it was going to be like, it's been good, it's been fun, it's been real fun, but this is it. And then I got introduced to Chemo Seymour at Lifetime through a mutual friend, and we started talking, and it was interesting, because I think they interviewed me, but I interviewed them just as hard. Like it was a tough decision to be able to come to that and feel like I was doing the right thing. But in the end, I do think it's the right thing, because the race is going to live on beyond me, and I think they're going to do a great job with it. And I helped handpick the person who is replacing me. Made sure she's local. She's actually right here in Cedar City, so she can come knock on my door anytime she wants to, if she has any problems or questions or anything like that. So I feel good. I feel good about it.
Cool. Well, I loved what you said about Ginger. She's taking over the race, Ginger Hall, that she can organize 2,500 high school mountain bikers at an event. Like Crusher is going to be no problem for her. I love that comment. Well, very cool. I was never nervous, but obviously you are the heart of the race. So it was interesting to hear your comments on what will move forward. So that's good.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what that's like, because everybody associates you with that race, and you grew it for a decade, and it was your baby. And like we've talked about before, the culture was so good. People just kept, such a hard race in Beaver, Utah, but people are just coming out, in droves to just suffer there. You created such a great thing.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Cool. Well, thank you. And I honestly, I can't take all credit for it. Like you said, I'm the heart and soul. And I think to a certain extent that could be true, but I also think the riders are the heart and soul of the event. And at a certain point, I started to see the riders and the people showing up, taking interest, or I shouldn't say interest, but ownership of the event, and realizing like this thing is way bigger than me, which was awesome. And it was a relief, honestly, because like I said, I only had so much energy to put into it, and to see it kind of take on a life of its own whether that's the riders showing up or the volunteers, the community, all of that. Um, that's been really cool. I mean, I might be the heart, but it takes a lot of other organs to keep the organism moving. So I think it's in good hands.
Nice.
It's the race I'm most excited for this year. I mean, people keep asking what races are you doing? What are you most excited for this year? And I keep saying, really, the only thing I'm really excited for this year is Crusher right now. I think we're a weird breed of people that just love suffering for some reason, but that's
Yeah.
our brand. That's our brand of suffering right there.
Yeah. Love it.
Do you think that gravel is going to just continue its meteoric rise and kind of dominate American racing for this decade?
That's a good question, and I honestly don't have an answer to that. I mean, um, I see a lot of parallels with mountain biking in the 1990s and its ascension into into the sphere of competitive cycling. Um, I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains. I think we're starting to experience those within gravel. I also think it's perhaps reaching a saturation point where there's just so many events on the calendar. It's crazy. Like, I mean, there used to be like 5 gravel events in the US for many years, and now there's like 5 per state, which is awesome. It's really cool. But I honestly, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm as interested as all the rest of you, because I mean, as much as I think I might have had a hand in cultivating where it headed early on, I think it's now in the hands of the participants to see where this thing goes and kind of what flavor it's going to have in the future. So I'm going to be eating popcorn there with all the rest of you guys watching what unfolds.
Yeah, it's so fun because all the brands are definitely behind it. The money seems to be better in gravel than it is in road, at least. And there's a lot of pros doing it. Now there's a national gravels event, and there's a gravel worlds, and UCI's involved now. It just seems like it's a steamroller right now. Nothing's going to touch it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going, and I think it checks a lot of boxes. Especially for people that are new to the sport. I think it's a lot more approachable than road cycling or mountain biking. So I do think it's just going to continue to grow. It's just going to be interesting to see how the competitive side of it grows along with the participation side. That's what is going to be really interesting to see, because I do see some limitations with gravel racing in terms of you've got riders that are just pushing the absolute limits, and that's one thing on pavement when you're kind of glued to pavement, but gravel's not so much the same way, and there's so many variables out there on the roads that my biggest concern first and foremost always has been safety. Like, making sure I had a safe event for everybody was and does continue to be my utmost concern with the event, on top of making sure everybody has a good time. I want to make sure everybody has a safe environment to have a good time in. And so I see that as being really critical to the development of gravel across the board, in making sure that people take into consideration the safety of the riders, and putting that first and foremost above everything else.
Very cool. Burke, maybe you could talk about what you're doing with First Endurance, what you're doing now. I watch you on Strava down in Cedar City. You get out, rain or shine. Like, I'm like, dude, it's freezing in Salt Lake, and Burke is out climbing the hills of Cedar City. There was a couple pictures you posted this winter where I'm like, how is he out right now? But maybe can you talk about that? What you're doing now? What you see in the future for yourself?
Yeah. Joining First Endurance. So, I mean, I've kind of been with First Endurance since the beginning, and perhaps even before that, because you mentioned Ryan, and his father Mike is the guy who founded First Endurance, and we actually met each other 30 plus years ago when we were going to college at Utah State University, and we're riding quite a bit together. And so I've known Mike forever, and I've been involved with the brand for 20 plus years at this point, and in varying capacities, whether it was a sponsored athlete or just, Mike and I being buddies, he'd call me up and bounce ideas. And later, as things have evolved and with Crusher and so forth, just kind of, trading ideas and thoughts on business, growing businesses and some of the challenges in there. So it's been pretty seamless. And that my position now with First Endurance is the sponsorship director. And so basically I am, recruiting and getting athletes and events involved with the brand,
Cool.
which is super fun for me because it's a pretty natural thing, just because I do have a history with a lot of these athletes. And so it comes a little easier for me, I think, from that perspective, and the fact that I do have all those connections. But also having Ryan involved with the brand has been awesome, because I mean, that kid's a whiz, man. He's amazing. He's just got an amazing mind, to head on his shoulders, and the business side of things just seems to come naturally to him. And I'm sure a lot of that comes from Mike as well. So, but as far as what the future holds, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of fun, because I really don't know what's in front of me. I want to just sink my teeth into this position as much as I can and see where it goes. I also really enjoy providing feedback and helping develop new products. I'm still very much, nutrition and supplementation has always been something I've been very interested in, and especially now as I'm getting older. I just turned 50, which is crazy to me to even say that, but I still have very much an interest in, not so much now the kind of the performance end of things for myself, personally speaking. Now I'm more interested in longevity and wellness, and I want to keep I want to see myself riding my bike 25 years from now. I still want to get on those mornings when people look out the window and say, hell no, I want to suit up and get out there. So, I want to keep living the life and feeling good physically, so that I can keep doing that with any luck.
Nice.
That's fantastic.
Burke, with all your experience, and maybe to dovetail how you answered that question, what advice would you give, looking back maybe to a young Burke, or even just our team? Is there something you've learned over the years in this sport that you would share with, whether, I don't know if it's training or nutrition or anything? Is there something you would say to riders in general?
I would say just make sure to keep it fun. I think some of my most challenging moments over the years, especially in my cycling career, was when I started to take things too seriously and push myself a little too hard. And I always, you always just go back to basics, right? Like when I'd hit those low ebbs and think I don't know if I can do this anymore. I would just, stop training according to I'd get rid of the power meter and all that stuff and just go out and ride, because that's what I wanted to do. And as soon as I got back into that mindset of doing it because I loved it, it's what I wanted to be doing, and stop being so focused on the outcome and more embracing the process and enjoying just riding my bike, that's when things would start to come back around for me. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. I mean, I think taking it seriously is great. And obviously I had to do that as a professional rider, but also just making sure that it was something that I enjoyed and still wanted to do was the most important thing, because over the years I saw so many riders that had so much more talent than I did, that took it incredibly seriously, and they got burned out and they just turned their back and walked away and probably never touched a bike again, For me, that's unthinkable. I mean, for me, the bike is as much for not just my physical health, but my mental health. And that kind of goes back to your point, getting out every day. I do that as much for my mental health, because if I don't, it deteriorates pretty quickly. And I guess that would be another thing is in terms of the winter, we've had a brutal winter, and every day I wake up and pull the blinds and look out the window and I see a million reasons not to get out there. And I just remind myself that it's never as bad on the other side of the glass.
That's true.
Actually doing it than when you're sitting, with a cup of coffee and feeling nice and warm and staring out at the wall of snow or whatever it happens to be. Like once you get out there and you start doing it, I'm always thankful and glad that I did it.
Oh, great advice. I love that. I didn't get out this morning. There was too many when I looked out. There was too many. The 40 minutes to get all my gear on, Jason.
Yeah. I was going to say, Burke, you haven't transitioned at all to Zwift and the trainer, I guess. You're just getting out there.
I haven't, man. I actually never really embraced the trainer. I mean, there were times when I had to do it when I was racing. But generally speaking, again, it just goes back to why I ride the bike in the first place. Like I like being outdoors. I mean, I can't imagine not being outdoors on a daily basis. And so the trainer isn't really a thing for me.
Chase, any other follow-ups on advice? Because I see one last question here that you've got for him.
The very last one.
Yeah.
I'm just really curious to kind of pick your brain a little bit on something, just because like we talked about earlier, it's some parts of cycling in the US are in a sad state with road racing and just participation and excitement around the sport. And gravel seems to really have taken off and ignited, a lot of conversation around getting people on bikes and everything. And the Lifetime Grand Prix series has been fantastic for that, getting the best athletes from around the world involved. And I wonder, do you think that a series like Lifetime could add road races as well? Like have 2 road races, 2 gravel races, 2 mountain bike races, and crown the best overall cyclist, something like that. Like there's a crown people are going for to get, to just kind of get people excited for all forms of bikes.
That's an interesting idea. I'll pitch it the next time next time I'm on the line with it, and I'll give you credit for it too.
Nice,
thank you. I mean, I know I see all these guys like Keegan and Finsty and these guys going out and doing the shootout rides in Tucson, and I know they ride their road bikes and they have a good time and it's competitive there as well. It seems like it would be great to add more. I know Legion is doing some great things with crit racing in the US, and they're paying some pro cyclists, full salaries so they can make a living. And maybe this is just another way to get, kids from the NICA program excited about, road bikes as well. And, I'm unsure how to create more excitement around bikes in general.
Yeah. I mean, at my heart, like I still love riding the road bike. I just don't do it that often because, I honestly don't know, even if I lived in a place where, you could go out and ride a road bike comfortably and safely, I don't know if I ever would have ventured off the pavement. Because riding a road bike there's nothing like putting on the skinny tires and going fast, right? I mean, that's a feeling that's hard to replicate. And I also think actually of all the, the different forms of gravel, mountain bike and road bike, I've always been able to hurt myself physically more on the road bike than any other bike for some reason. There's very little to get in the way of how much you can pour into the pedals on a road bike. So I do think there is a place for road cycling, and I hope people continue to try and find ways to be able to do that. And I look at a race like Tour of the Gila, and they did have to cancel the 1-2 race this year, and that was a huge bummer. But they're still going. There's still an event, and Gila is really kind of the last man standing of all those like big stage races that I told you about that I got to do when I was younger. Still there, and it's all because of the people in Silver City, particularly Jack Brennan, the race director. He has such a passion for it. Like, it blows my mind to think how much time, effort, and energy that guy's put into that event over the last 30 plus years. I mean, I think there should be a bronze statue of Jack Brennan in the Silver City Square, because That guy is just, I don't know. I mean, he's just an amazing person, and has contributed so much to road cycling and the town of Silver City as well. So hopefully, events like Gila, Redlands, Joe Martin, those events can still find a way to keep operating, because I think they're beautiful. They're great races.
Yeah. They're gonna have to put a statue of you in Beaver pretty soon.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know about that.
It's gonna get bigger and bigger.
I love that. Well, very good, Burke. Hey, grateful for you. Will you race this year at Crusher?
I'm not 100% sure. I told myself I was going to race on my 50th year, and it ended up coming a little earlier last year because of some unfortunate circumstances with my dad passing away. I just felt compelled, like that was the year to do it. So I'm like a maybe this year, because I still have not completely passed the baton over to Ginger. I want to make sure that I'm there for her, to support her, and my allegiance is first and foremost to the race. And if I feel like I can get everything done and find myself on the start line this year, I'll be there. But otherwise, I might be out driving, signs in the ground and doing all the stuff that I've done for the last 12 years. So
nice.
But I will be there.
Passing out one of the 8 different Cokes I drank on the course last year.
Yep.
Well, me and Jason will be there. We can't wait for it. So hopefully the snow will start melting and everything will be good for the race.
Yeah, actually, that's got me thinking too. I mean, this snow year is actually above and beyond the one I described in 2011.
Wow.
I think there's a possibility we're going to have to move some snow this year to get the race happening.
Cool.
So we might just have people scrambling over snow drifts in places, which I think is cool too.
That'd be so cool.
That is cool. So it's not going to get canceled, right? It's just the race will go on.
Yeah. One way or another, if we have to push snow, or if we, riders have to get off and shoulder the bike over some drifts. Personally, I think that'd be pretty cool.
I love
so
that.
do I. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Very cool. Hey, well, thanks, Burke. Grateful for you.
Guys.
Thankful for all you do for cycling and what you created. Appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys. This has been fun.
All righty, Jace. See ya.
See ya.
Take care, guys.